Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Matt here. Matt, you're somebody that has transformed the internet. You did something that made the internet more accessible to build upon, and now it's used by almost half of the top websites in the world are based on what you've created. You own your company owns one of the predominant social networks that's really helped change conversations and catalyze conversations between all different types of people globally. You're an angel investor. I mean, there's so many things that you've done that have contributed to the growth of society. So it's great to have you here and to get into your story.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So where did your passion for technology, for entrepreneurship, like how did that begin? Was it something that you had as a kid? Was it something that you always wanted to do? Like where did that start?
Yeah, it was from a very young age. I just love tools that let you do things, and just like any kid, I was playing with recorders and, you know, tape boys and different things. And as those instruments, musical instruments are basically tools that expands our human capacity to make sound, right? It's a form of technology. Computers are not that much of a stretch of a different form of technology. It allows us to do things beyond what we could normally do. And I really like making those tools because when you make those tools and you see what people create with them, wow, it's amazing, you know?
Mhm. For sure. So was there like a specific experience or event that led to the creation of WordPress? I mean, you said you wanted to make tools and to help other people create things. Was there one sort of experience that kind of said, "Hey, from this, I'm going to create WordPress"?
Yeah, I was sharing. So there was no like Facebook or Flickr or Instagram or any place to share your photos or anything. So I had gone on a trip to Washington, D.C. Because I had won an economics competition actually. And I wanted to share the photos from my first digital camera back to my friends back home in Houston. And so yeah, I made a website for it and wanted to have a way to connect and share photos and have comments, and not that dissimilar from what people do on social media today. It was very much a desire even back then.
When did it start to become like a business? Was it just out of necessity? Other people seemed to like what you were doing and they wanted to create their own version of it. Like, how did it become a business?
Well, so for WordPress, it really started not as a business, but as a movement. So WordPress is open
Mhm.
source, which means that the code belongs just as much to you as it does to me. The code is all open for anyone to see or modify or redistribute. And it was based on a previous open source project. So I started modifying and improving that other open source. And then I released my modifications to others so they could do the same. And that's what WordPress grew out of. So really, the core is that open source. The cool thing about open source is one of the freedoms that are allowed by open source is you can sell it as well. So, we started selling some add-ons to the core, plugins or themes, and hosting. You can sell services as well on top of it. So, we created WordPress.com, which is a place that instead of configuring it all yourself and setting up the database and the web server and everything, you come to WordPress.com and we do it all for you. So that was the idea. But the cool thing is now 20 years later, it's still all open source. So if you wanted to, open up the hood and see how it worked or run it without me or do anything you want, like you can still do that.
Mhm. Did you think that it was going to become as successful and as widely adopted initially? Like, I mean, after you had this idea phase and you built it for yourself because you wanted to have photos, etc., on there, but did you think that it was going to become used by so many other people, or how did that kind of like your thinking kind of evolve?
I'll tell you the time it first started to be something more than just for me and my friends. I thought, because really I was just making it for myself. I was a kid in Houston. Um, there was a gentleman in Japan, actually, who had taken the code I had published and put online and gone through it line by line, like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of lines, and taken all the English and replaced it with Japanese just by hand, manually.
Wow.
Must have taken him dozens or hundreds of hours. And then he released a Japanese version of WordPress again because it's open source, so you can do that. And I was like, wow, that was I can't believe that. And that was really cool. Um, because it looked like the software I created, but it was totally foreign because obviously Japanese has its own characters. It's not ABCD. It's, the different hiragana and katakana characters for writing. And so that just really exploded my mind. Really blew. And so that's when I first, one, I thought this could be a lot bigger. And two, I thought we need to make translations a lot easier. So he doesn't have to do it by hand. And now, we have a system for translations, and WordPress is available in, I think, 50 plus languages.
Mhm. So initially, like, how was it on the funding side of things? Like, did you need to raise capital right away? Were you able to just kind of bootstrap it enough initially? And then even when you were going out to raise capital and you did your first round, like how difficult was it to convince people in your vision and what you were trying to build here?
Well, the cool thing about the web and software is that I didn't really have any cost, So, like, I mean, there's maybe I had to register the domain. That's like $20 a year. I had to host it. That's maybe, to run the servers was like $100 or $200 a month. But like the startup cost online and with technology can be very, very low. And so I was able to test out the idea for, call it hundreds of dollars or thousands of
Mm,
dollars, and see whether it resonated with people. I did later raise money, but it was kind of after things had really taken off. It already had, tens of thousands of users and was really showing it was a functional product.
mhm. So there was a point when you decided to bring in a CEO, Tony, and you had him come in, and I think you learned a lot from the experiences and the way that he structured things and operated. Why did you think that it was the right decision to have the CEO come in and to lead, and you kind of took a different role at that time?
Yeah, so WordPress started to grow. I got a job offer in San Francisco, so I dropped out of school, took that job in San Francisco at a tech company, and yeah, once I got there, started talking to investors and VCs and other things about how this could be bigger. And I realized that I knew a lot about the community and the software, but really not about building a company. And
Huh.
so, and I was 20. So, but luckily, when I met Tony, he was a little further along in his career, a little bit older than me, and also like we were totally aligned on values and the beliefs and what this thing could become. So it was almost like meeting my business soulmate. So I was like, oh yeah, of course I want to work with this guy and build something together. And yeah, so he joined the company, and yeah, that was like he's basically like a co-founder. Like we created a lot of automatic together.
Mhm. So it says on your LinkedIn bio that you've kind of taken all these different roles on. You were the janitor, the event planner. You've kind of been in every role possible. Do you think that that's really like shaped the culture that you have at the company, and how much of an impact do you think that's had on other people around you?
Yeah, I think it's great to try something yourself before you ask someone else to do it. Both gives you an appreciation for the work and also will help you find the best person who could do it better than you. So the fact that I did all those things doesn't mean I'm great at all of them. It just means that, what I was hearing from customers is that they needed something. I was trying to serve the customer, so I did it. And then, found someone who was way better than me to keep doing it.
Right. So, there was a point where you decided around your 30th birthday that you're going to become CEO of the company. And you made that decision. I think it was a big decision for you to do that. Why did you feel that it was right then, that was the right time?
Interesting. So Tony and I had been at that point working together for many years, and he really loved the startup phase of things, and taking teams from like 0 to 50 or 100 people. And he had also been I'd been learning kind of on the job, watching him work. And I was very excited about taking us from a couple hundred people to a couple thousand people. So he kind of passed the torch and said, "Hey, uh, keep running with this." And we kind of switched roles. Tony is still actually at the company, and for he ran our special labs, then was on the board, and is now actually come back in a lot of ways to like, run things uh, for some different teams day to day. So I think it shows that when you develop a lot of trust and you find great people, you figure out like, just have the conversation about what you enjoy working on and
Mhm.
divide the responsibilities. It's not really about the title or anything. Like Tony and I both like could care less who's called CEO or president or whatever it is. It's like, what's the job to be done? And what do we get energy from doing? And what do we want to work on? And so we just had a lot of conversations about that and then decided to divide up the responsibilities.
Mhm. And earlier, Matt, you mentioned that when you were young, in your 20s, and trying to figure out how to make this much more scalable, you felt that, like, from a leadership standpoint, that maybe there was somebody else better to run certain business operations at that time. Did you feel like at this time you were really ready to take over, and you understood, from a business perspective, the right things necessary to take it to this thousand, plus people person company that you wanted to be at?
Well, also the job changes a bit when you're at that size. So,
Hmm.
when you're really small and you're the CEO, you do need to do all the legal and the finance and the everything else. But at the point when we were hundreds of people, we had a chief financial officer and a head of legal. And so we had like people in all of those roles. So all the things that I didn't know, honestly, still don't know how to do, we had hired people who were really fantastic at and could lead those things. And so, as this is true of any large company, like the CEO role, you can define yourself once you get above, I would say, call it 50 people, because you're really at that point saying like, okay, I'm going to set the tone. I'm going to like make sure, set the culture of the company, fundraising, hiring, firing, and then you can kind of choose your path for what kind of CEO you want to be. Do you want to be like an engineering CEO, product led CEO, market led CEO? So there's lots of different sort of I would say varieties of CEOs out there.
So there's been many different acquisitions that you guys have done. One of which was Tumblr, and that was a unique acquisition. I think that even when it was purchased, people didn't even realize it was. I think it was publicly not realized it was even available, and that you guys came in, you purchased it, and you had this different vision for Tumblr. Why did you decide to acquire the company? What instincts did you have and reasons behind the acquisition initially?
Oh, I was an early user of Tumblr, and I
Mhm.
always loved that sort of uh, free form creative space it created where it was
Huh.
blogging, but it was really fun. You could use the tags to find things you were interested in. People would riff on each other. It had a lot of I think is actually the sweet spot in between like just posting a site all by yourself and kind of publishing, more like a newsletter or blog or something, and the social media where like you there's a lot of interaction, but you don't really have your own thing. Tumblr's right in the middle, where you can have the
Mm.
best of both worlds. You can have all the interaction and interactivity of social media, so getting that feedback loop, the likes, the comments, the reblogging, etc. But you still can create your own space. You have your own domain, your own design, your everything. So I love that sweet spot.
Mm. Yeah. I think a lot of people did. And, even at one point, like Tumblr was, I think, the largest, it was like the largest at the time. And it went through a bunch of different phases. It's now going through a new phase with you guys. What do you think it's going to take to to grow Tumblr, to the next phases that you guys want it to be at? Like, what do you think is necessary to bring it to that point?
Oh, that's a good question. We're really focused for Tumblr on, it's a pretty large community. The people that use Tumblr is larger than the city of New York. So, yeah, you're like, wow, how do you take care of these folks? And so, um, running that product's kind of like being a mayor. You listen to the people
Huh.
and say, like, what are they asking for? Um, you know, what can we provide for them to do more of what they want? And people say they want a place on the internet that's not as combative as some of the other, like Twitter or X, that's not as like, you know, showing off like Instagram,
Mm.
and that sort of serves them versus they feel like they're not like addicted to or like uh they're getting more of what they want, which is artist and creativity and able to support people. So that's what we're trying to create with Tumblr.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you have, I think I read this online. You have like a structure for the company similar to like Berkshire Hathaway, with different types of people leading different divisions, and they kind of control that division on its own. Um, so why did you want to go and implement a structure like this, and how has that affected overall the management of it? I mean, people are probably really empowered to could be able to be in control of their own avenues. I mean, how has that been?
I think that's just a function of scaling. So, like, as you build something, you'll hopefully find people better than yourself to run different areas or products or divisions, and and then you want to get out of their way. If they're better than you, why would you tell them what to do? Like, you can have a check-in point, or give them feedback or give them input. But ultimately, what you really want is that they're driving the product and the business uh, primarily. Yeah. So that's where it works best.
Mhm. So there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse, and we've seen the Apple Vision Pro, and that headset, and Apple's got their vision for it. What's your vision for the metaverse and building upon the web, and what do you think is kind of the next phase of creation of the internet? What do you think the internet will be looking like?
The cool thing is we're already in it, right? Like, think how much of our lives we
Mhm.
spend looking at screens or with screens or talking to people who aren't physically with us. So we're already in a type of metaverse, and it's possible that the screens get better, audio quality gets better, bandwidth gets higher, like that. So the resolution of the experience will hopefully continue to improve. I don't know if we're gonna wear like giant goggles around all day. Probably not. Just seems like kind of bulky. But maybe for playing games or watching movies or kind of specific parts of the day, that could be fun. Um, what's fundamental though, and what I really love about it, is it allows people to connect with each other regardless of their geography. Allows folks to find each other. Let's say you have a niche interest, you could find someone else who's really into that interest. Let's say you like quilting Elvis, quilts or something. You can find, maybe there's only like 100 of you in the world, but like you can find them all online, and that's kind of cool. And I love that because it really sort of speaks to the human condition and creativity and the uniqueness of all of our paths, our interest and our desires and the things we're into. Like we should be able to express that fully. And I feel like our physical bodies and where we happen to be born or live um, are constraining. So online, you can shed that. You can have a different identity. You can look different. You can have whatever name you want. That's the cool thing about Tumblr. Or a blog or WordPress. You can call it whatever you want. Who cares how you look or where you're born or where you went to school or how much money you have? Like, you can make something online that looks amazing. It has a really great quality. It costs almost nothing to create. So versus, if in a city, if you wanted to be really fancy, you'd have to like spend millions of dollars to build a big house. You don't have to do that online. You just have to spend a lot of time and creativity. You can build the most beautiful website in the world and have the equivalent of like a $10 million mansion, but it's just online.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. So, there's been a lot with AI developments, and I think that a lot of people have said like this has been like the year of AI because we've seen with ChatGPT and et cetera. Like, how are you thinking about implementing AI in the current products and that you have, and what do you think it's going to be most beneficial?
Yeah, AI is transforming everything. I would encourage everyone listening to this to play with the tools as much as possible. Um, it's how's it going to transform our business? Well, I think right now we're like, you might need to know how to code to create things or click a lot of buttons to customize your site. You're going to be able to just say, hey, could you make my site more grungy or make it a little more goth or make the images, more blue. So you'll be able to like have a more natural language interaction, and that will be translated into, you know, a robot AI clicking the buttons and doing all the code to make that happen. Um, so yeah, the means of creation, the barrier to entry for creation will go down um, which means a lot more stuff will be created, which means the quality of what you create is what really matters.
Huh. Right. And also the individualism for sure. So you've been an angel investor in various different companies. I think you invest in SpaceX, Stripe, and Ring. What generally, Matt, like goes into your thought process of I should invest in, like, what are the criteria that's required usually for you to invest in the company? Is it the person? Is it the team behind it, the idea, the stage that they're at? Like, what do you usually look for in startups?
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky in that because I'm a builder and maker myself. I
Mhm.
know a lot of the other folks who build and make things. And so just through those personal relationships, connected to some companies that I think are very, very exciting and creating the future. And when an opportunity comes up to put some money into them, yeah, I do. So that's I don't think I'd recommend that for the general population, but and for public stocks, I'm very vanilla. Like I do Berkshire Hathaway and index funds and stuff like that. But um, yeah, I just have access to some great entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's why I put money with them.
Huh. So your last funding round, you raised it, I think, a $7 billion valuation, and there was a certain purpose you had in mind during that time. And you haven't, I think that was around 2021 was the last funding round. I don't think you've raised since then. Do you think you're going to require a new funding round, and what would be the purpose of that type of funding?
Oh, um, yeah, at our scale, which is you're into the billions and the hundreds of millions of funding, like it's kind of capital is a means to an end, right? So it's like, what are you going to
Mhm.
do with it? We have a large business with millions of subscribers, hundreds of millions of revenue, and so we say if there's something we want to do, like an acquisition or uh, invest something or build something or buy something, like, the money is a means to an end. And there's various ways to get the money. There could be debt, there could be public markets, there could be private markets. And so that's kind of the matrix of criteria that you look at for deciding, how to apply it next. So if we raise
Mhm.
funding, it would be, yeah, for a purpose.
Mhm. So the follow-up would be to that, like, are there some purposes that you're currently looking into that you've thought about raising funding for? And what would those be if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, um, so I'll remove the funding part because that's not
Okay.
something we're currently doing. But yeah, our main areas are very exciting. So publishing, WordPress, Tumblr. We have this enterprise business, which is basically taking WordPress and making it so like Fortune 1000 companies and governments can use it. So we host the WhiteHouse.gov. That's very, very
Huh.
exciting. We have e-commerce, which is WooCommerce. Think of it like an open source Shopify. So it's like Shopify, but way more flexible. You can customize it, do whatever you want with it. And that's very exciting. And we just added a new area just a few weeks ago, which is, I'll call it the fourth leg of the stool. Um, and that's messaging. So we have a
Huh.
product called Text, which is texts.com,
Huh.
um, that lets you take all your messaging apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, Messenger, Instagram, etc., Twitter, bring it all into one app on your desktop.
Hmm.
And this is yeah, it's desktop only right now. It's a power user thing, so it's kind of like for more power users or early adopters. But this is a very exciting space that I think we can grow and develop into for many years to come.
Mhm. Right. So you were a board member and board observer for GitLab, and you were involved in that for a bit. I mean, how impactful was it learning from their experiences and being involved in the company on your own on what you're doing and what you're creating? Was there just a lot that you learned? Was there a lot of overlap?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I learned so much. So GitLab is an incredible company. They practice. They publish like their entire employee handbook, and basically they have open sourced their whole company. So you can go to like
Huh.
about.gitlab.com and see everything about how they run. Which, if you're building a company, I encourage you to look at because they've thought about a lot of these things. They've been very successful. They built an incredible business, And so you can kind of see their operating manual, their playbook. And I think like we publish a lot, but they would Automatic has, but they went even a level further in transparency. So that was fantastic, and I was very, uh, you know, fortunate to sort of be a part of that and see how that happened. The other thing I learned a lot was just enterprise. So, a lot of what I do is what we call direct to consumer. So it's selling to regular people, swiping their credit cards and paying for something. And enterprise sales is more B2B or business to business. Very different. And we did some of that, but I wasn't as familiar with it personally, and I learned a lot about that being a fiduciary director on the GitLab board. I just spent a lot of time getting up to speed on how enterprise stuff worked, so that I could fulfill my roles as a director. So that's really what you do as a board director, is you have a duty to the company, fiduciary duty, to make sure that you are representing the interests of the shareholders. And so you need to learn as much as you can about the area that you're working in. So the reason I took that on was as an opportunity to essentially go to school. So there was whatever the hours were on the board meeting, um, were the board meetings, but I was spending dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours outside of that, trying to get up to speed on the business and the area, so that I could, as my role as director, provide the best service possible.
Just the last question that I have, Matt. Somebody that's a builder, you get excited about building things. What are you most excited about building next within the next 5 years, let's say?
I'm really excited about the messaging space. So there's so much balkanization, fragmentation in messaging that there's some innovation happening. I think Telegram does some really cool things. I love that most messaging platforms are moving to be more secure, and encrypted, and I feel like privacy is a fundamental human right. And yeah, I'm just excited to contribute to that. There's a lot going on in the space, and I hope that we can bring some of these to the table, as we have with publishing and commerce in the past.
Mhm. Look, man, I appreciate you coming on. You have a great story. You've done something that has changed many people's lives, and you continue to do that with what you're building in Automatic. It's exciting, and I'm excited to see with this new messaging product what you do with it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of fragmentation in that space, and maybe the power users can become everybody. So, I wish you much success with what you do next, and I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much.